Transformers 1, as of right now, for me is the best Transformers movie, and I may go as far to say as it is one of the best movies of the year. So yes, I think it does absolutely live up to the hype that it is getting, so let's talk about this thing. Now, this will be a spoiler-free review, but as always, if you want to see what I gave this movie out of 10, head over to my shorts, TikTok, or Instagram and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. But without further ado, let's talk about Transformers 1. Now, just like everyone else, when I saw the trailer for the first time, I was a bit skeptical of this movie, especially of the cast that they chose for this film. But now that I've seen this thing, I can honestly say this movie is awesome and I love just about every second of it. In this movie, we follow a young Megatron and Optimus Prime known as Orion Pax and D16 as we see the origin story of their friendship and what splits them apart that leads them to become the characters that we know today. Starting things off with the good, I of course have the story. Now, the story surprised me in this thing. It was a lot better than I thought it would be, and I saw a review that kind of described it as X-Men First Class, but for Transformers movies, and I can say that is a very accurate comparison. It's a story that does get better as it goes on, and even though this is a movie that's technically targeted towards kids and definitely has its lightheartedness, it really takes on a serious tone when it comes to the relationship between Megatron and Optimus. Now, obviously, we know they are going to split by the end of this movie, but the way they go about that, in my opinion, is pretty cool and really a breath of fresh air for this franchise. They essentially start as these worker bots at the bottom of the totem pole and then go on this big journey that allows them to become, no pun intended, but more than meets the eye. It's one of those things that even though they end up on different sides, they both want the same things, but they want to achieve those things in different ways. We get to see the why behind why each character turned out the way they did, and you truly care about this relationship all the way through, and that just makes the end of this movie hit that much harder because the third act of this movie is just absolutely phenomenal, and it is a big reason on why I love this movie so much. Next up for the good, I have the voice acting. Now, as I said before, this is something that I was very much skeptical of going into this thing, but I have to say, everyone did a pretty good job when it came to voice acting in this thing. The one I was most skeptical on was Chris Hemsworth as Optimus Prime, but he did a pretty good job in this movie. Now, obviously, it's pretty tough to live up to what Peter Cullen did for Optimus Prime because he was just a legend and no one will ever be as good as he was as Optimus Prime. But as I said, Chris Hemsworth did a good job, and as Orion Pax slowly became Optimus Prime in this movie, we kind of heard his voice change and get closer and closer to what Optimus Prime sounds like. Then you have Brian Tyree Henry as Megatron, and I think he did a phenomenal job. He was really the secret star of the show, in my opinion, and out of all of these voice actors, he was the only one that really got lost in his role, and by that I mean you kind of forgot it was him voicing Megatron. With everyone else, every time their character spoke, you could still kind of hear their voice kind of in the background, but you could tell who was speaking, whether it was Scarlett Johansson, Chris Hemsworth, or Keegan Key. But there were times in this movie where I completely forgot that he was playing Megatron because he was just that good. And then for everyone else, like Scarlett Johansson, I mean, we knew she was going to do well. She always kills it in whatever role she was in. We had Keegan Key, who did well and was honestly one of the funniest people in this movie. Lawrence Fishburne was in there. John Hamm was in there as well. I'm probably forgetting a couple other people, but the voice acting, I am completely satisfied with what we got, considering I was very skeptical of it going into this movie. Next up for the good, I have the humor. Now, the humor worked for me. It was obviously family friendly and kind of more targeted towards kids, but it still got plenty of laughs out of me, and there were also a couple of jokes in there that kind of push that PG rating just a little bit as well. Keegan Key, as I said before, was definitely the funniest of the bunch. He served as the comedic relief for this movie, and he did a really good job as Bumblebee. And there was also a joke in there from him that referenced one of the greatest skits from Key and Peele of all time, and I just laughed out loud when I heard it. Each character got their own time to shine and kind of throw a joke in there that would make you laugh, and I will say this movie was very much heavy on the humor in the beginning, but it does kind of balance out as this film goes on. And finally, for the good, I have the action, and I will say this is probably some of the best Transformers action that we have ever gotten, and the animation 100% helps with that because you can just do more in animation. It's a big open world, you can pretty much do whatever you want, and they didn't have the restrictions and limitation that live action movies present. And once these action scenes got going, you really saw that animation start to shine because this movie was also just visually stunning in its own right. I mean, there were so many sequences in this thing where people were just cheering around me because of the action and just some of the stuff they were able to pull off because of this animation on screen. And then when we get to that third act and it's just action left and right, and then we get to that final fight between Megatron and Optimus Prime, that is probably my favorite part of the movie and just favorite action sequence of the movie. Moving on to the so-so, and the only thing I have here is the character change of D16, aka Megatron. Now, I could see this being one of the big criticisms of this movie because his character change did feel very abrupt in my opinion. I mean, they gave him some good reasons on why his character went in the direction that he did, but it just happened so quickly that it almost felt forced at times. Before he began to change, we really got no hints or teases that foreshadowed his turn, where when it came to Orion Pax, we could see characteristics of Optimus Prime in him throughout this movie. So when he made his turn and finally became Optimus Prime, it felt more organic and less forced. But with D16, once a certain part in this movie happened, they very much rushed him to becoming Megatron, and that just felt very weird and abrupt to me. And finally, getting into the bad, and the only thing I have here is that this movie does get off to a bit of a slow start, even though the story does get better as it goes on. The first 15 to 20 minutes of this thing was the lighthearted, jokey kids film that I thought it was going to be. As I said before, the beginning of this movie was very heavy on the humor and it had a very unserious tone, and you really weren't sure where they were going to go with things. But as this thing goes on and the plot really kicks off, it takes on a more serious tone and gets better and better and better as it goes on. But overall, this movie is awesome in my opinion. It's the Transformers movie that we have been waiting on and gives you a great origin story for Optimus and Megatron that really sets things up for an amazing trilogy. So yes, this is a movie that I would definitely recommend you go see. Those are my thoughts on Transformers 1. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.